the folks from the ALS Association actually asked me if I would be able to talk a little bit about having difficult conversations. And as she shared, I've got a background in hospice and palliative care. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of opportunities for some difficult conversations in hospice and palliative care. And I just wanted to share a little bit about how I think about approaching tough conversations. And I think the way that my mind works with it is I want to take a little bit of a bigger overview of the situation. I don't want to just hone in on what's the subject that's hard to talk about. And so when thinking about difficult conversations in this population of people who have ALS and their loved ones who care for them, it just kind of got me thinking, initially when they get a diagnosis, everybody kind of goes through different feelings. And Christy, I wonder if you could advance the slide. And these are just some of our goals. It was my little outline for my own self to kind of make sure I'm remembering what we're talking about. But if you could advance the slide again. Um, oh,
There we go.
yeah. So this is patients with ALS. And I am by no means an expert. I am an observer into this small and beautiful world that my patients allow me to share with them. These are some of the things that they have either demonstrated or told me with their own words what they have felt like when they have gotten their diagnosis. And for me, it's very important to kind of know sort of where, where people are coming from, how they're feeling, how they're kind of processing information, and how they respond. I think a lot of times people respond to this diagnosis similarly to how they respond to other tough things in life. So it wouldn't be a surprise that they would maybe respond in a similar way. I'm sure that you all can imagine probably other responses and experiences to whether you're the one that received the diagnosis or putting yourself in someone's shoes that got that diagnosis. Um, Around some of these experiences and responses, I think can bring about very intense feelings and feelings of the people around the person. And I think as wonderful humans as we all are, we want to rush in and help somebody when we know that they're hurting, and we want to do something to try to fix it or make it better. And that's an opportunity at times for there to be for difficult conversations to arise, because we might all have a different idea of how we want to fix or heal or tend to our person that's hurting. So this is just a couple of, like I said, thoughts that some of my patients have shared with me when they've gotten the diagnosis. The next slide talks a little bit about caregivers to people who have ALS. Some of the things you may or may not be surprised to learn. They're sometimes on a very different page than the person who has the diagnosis. I think it's common when I start working with a patient who's new to me, I may have a conversation with them, uh, and then I may have a conversation with their loved one, and those conversations are completely coming from different perspectives. And yeah, Sharon, I see you nodding in relation to that. So again, I think depending on what our role is when this devastating diagnosis is made, it informs sort of how we feel about it and how we want to try to respond. So again, by no means am I an expert. These are just some of the things that my families have shared with me. One thing I wanted to point out about memory loss is I've had more than a few spouses say that in the first few months that retaining information just was really hard. And they would get frustrated with themselves and frustrated with the doctors because they couldn't recall information. And I think that can be a common phenomenon in the face of a serious illness diagnosis. And even though you're not the one who's been diagnosed, you can have very real physical and cognitive responses. Um, and it can just be a lot. So I want to name that and acknowledge that, again, whether you're the patient or the loved one, everyone's going to have usually very strong feelings. And so that sort of, for me, kind of creates the landscape of everybody's feeling a little bit more tense and emotional, and that can make just having conversation feel harder. um so I wasn't sure. I'm just going to pause right there, and if there are no questions or comments we can move on, but I just wanted to take a pause. Yeah, Sharon.
Well, one of the things that you don't list for a caregiver is fear. And
Mhm.
for a guy, especially for a husband, women are often thrust into caregiving roles, men not so frequently. And so for him, it was absolute terror, fear about how he was going to manage my care.
That's such an excellent point. I love that. I will add that to my list for sure. And I think too, the point about the male partner not, I think it just in our culture, I think we have just been sort of conditioned to, like, you know, the adult daughter is going to take care of mom and dad. The adult, like, the wife is going to take care of everything, or maybe retired mom is going to step in and help with the grandkids. But you often don't see the male person stepping into that caregiver role naturally or as easily. And so that fear and trepidation of, maybe not having that life experience and then being thrust into that, absolutely is something that a lot of our caregivers experience. Thank you for bringing that up. All right. So what goes along with our feelings and our responses, to this kind of catastrophic news, and not just specific to ALS, but just in life in general. What can we control? What can't we control? And I did like this visual, and I just thought is like a good reminder. And I look at, semi-routinely, if I feel myself starting to get a little prickly about something, I have to kind of recenter myself and realize, this is beyond what I can control. Um, I can't control other humans. I can't control what they do or what they think. Um, but very importantly, and I think this is such an important message for people who are living with ALS as well, that say to me, like, I have no control anymore. I have no power. It's all been taken from me. And I think to try to redirect them to this idea of, like, your thoughts, your goals, what you give your energy and love to, that is all 100% your control and only your control, right? And so I think it's just important for us to just, again, when we are in a situation where someone we love is hurting and people kind of come out of the woodwork and everybody has different opinions or thoughts on how we should go forward or what decisions should be made, I think it can be really important just to remind ourselves of what we do and don't control. So when over the years, when I've been doing my palliative care training and learning and trying to grow my understanding of conversation and communication in times of serious illness, this theory has come up so many times, and I can't tell you how much I love it. And so what you're looking at is a visual. It's called the oh, sorry, it's called the silk or the ring theory, and it was created by psychologist Susan Silk and her friend Barry Goldman, and they developed it as a simple visual to kind of help us know what to say and to whom to say it when someone we love is in crisis. And so I think it can be really helpful in guiding people in who they talk to about what. Um, and so basically, if you would imagine your own circle and the person who has ALS goes in that center circle. And then the next outer ring is maybe their spouse or their most immediate family member. And then you back up another ring, and that might be children, grandchildren, parents, siblings, and you keep backing it out as your circle of support gets broader and broader. And basically, the idea of this ring theory is that everyone in the outside circles needs to offer support to the people in the inner circles. Okay, so support's going in. So if you're a coworker of a person that's hurting and you give them all that support inward, okay, that is your role. On the opposite side of that is that you don't dump your own feelings or struggles to the people in the smaller circles. The person in the middle can say anything they want to anyone and they want in the circle. Caveat, as long as, I mean, there's some parameters around that. But the idea is that they are the one who are directly living with this thing. They can be frustrated. They can have a tantrum. They can question things. They can feel their feelings. People in the outer ring circles can support them. They put comfort in toward that person in the middle. People in the outer circles, if they want to have a tantrum, if they want to be frustrated, have doubts or questions or angry, the idea is that you're not putting that energy toward the person in the middle, but you're maybe turning to someone in one of the outer rings. And that is just a way to protect the person. One of the things that so many of my patients talk about when they get their diagnosis is like everyone comes out of the woodwork, wants to talk to them, wants to hear all about it, wants to share their own grief with the person. Like, I was so shocked and sad when I heard you got this diagnosis. I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. And my patients say that it causes them to feel a mix of guilt and, I guess, weight, that now suddenly they're finding themselves trying to comfort other people when they're the ones that are saying, wait a minute, I got the diagnosis and I don't know if I can do this. And it can just be overwhelming. And I think too, the expectation that the person who got the diagnosis has to keep telling their story over and over as people in their circles learn, can be really traumatizing and just re-traumatizing. And I think that this image gives me kind of a visual of, okay, if we don't want the person in the middle exhausting themselves or re-traumatizing themselves in having to tell their story to all these people in all the big circles. And so can we ask someone in the next big circle or the third big circle, can you tell my story? We're providing a little bit of comfort and a little bit of boundary around the person, a little bit of protection. not every patient feels like this, but enough do. Enough have told me and talked about it that I felt like it was really important, because that was an example to me of something that they didn't always know how to tell their friends and family. Like, I don't have the energy to talk about this. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to retell the story of me getting my diagnosis. And I think that as people who are surrounding the person, this can be an opportunity for us to offer support and say, can I be your voice? Can I tell your story? Can I tell our church friends? Can I tell the neighbors? Would that help you? Would that take that burden off of you? And that can be a tool that we can use outside of ALS, even, if there's just someone's hurting and someone's sad. And, I think one of the common things we've probably all heard with people in our lives who've been on hard times, everybody goes to the person and says, what can I do for you? And people say that feels like another responsibility that now I'm saddled with. Now I have to come up with things for people to do for me. And I'm not good at asking for help, or I don't know what I need. And so I just, like I said, I wanted to kind of share this visual with you all that's really helped me. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or comments about the comfort in and the dump out. And I recognize it's not a perfect theory. And I've had a little bit of some feelings of tension at times where, if the person in the center circle has always been the person that you've gone to, and now you're saying you can't go to them, that does create a little tension and friction. And so how do we sort of work with that?
Anyone have any thoughts right now on that? We're kind of digesting.
I guess, what if you only have a couple of circles or a couple of rings?
I think that, and forgive me for using a term that's maybe associated with religion, but I think that means you're blessed. You've got circles, you've got rings. I think some people who historically haven't had a big circle, and maybe that's by preference or by design, if they find themselves with this diagnosis, I think one of the challenges for that person is to be open to the idea of adding circles and adding rings. So inviting people like the ALS Association team into your life, into your circle, inviting your support people through your clinic into that circle. They become part of that circle as well. And I think I don't want to minimize your question, Jennifer, because I think, this is a disease that takes many, many people to support the person experiencing it. But, I think just being open to the idea of expanding your circles in whatever way that looks like. And
Yeah, I personally
yeah,
think being one of those ALS Association people, I get a lot of the dump out from the outer rings. People can dump on us instead of the center person.
that's a really good point too, because I think sometimes the person in the middle, while that's like a really real sort of core need that they need to process what's going on with them, and they need to like have emotion and have anger and be mad, they don't always necessarily want to turn that onto the person in the next circle out. They don't want to harm that relationship. So it's so important to have people like Christy and her team, or the clinic staff that you can dump out to. And I encourage you to use us in those ways. That's
Yep.
what we're here for.
Yeah, you guys and family members, absolutely. We are an outlet.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sharon.
I also think it's interesting. I hadn't thought of this in the context of asking for help, because that's one of the things that's going to be upcoming for me is asking for help, and I'm really, really bad at it. So I like that you use this circle idea and delegating that to somebody else. You be my
Mhm.
asker,
Yeah.
So-
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
not alone in that.
yeah.
Yeah. And we've even had people go so far as to say, all communication needs to go through, my cousin, Mary, like at least for the next couple of weeks. Just things are very overwhelming right now. And we know you care and we know you love us and we know you want to help, but it's just very overwhelming. So please send everything through Mary, and I think people are generally really receptive to that. And it does give them a sense of like they're being heard too. Like they, I think in general, we all just want to like take care of our people and show them love when they're hurting. And I think that that's a way that you can kind of give back, to be honest. It's a lot of people feel like, oh, I got this diagnosis and all I do is receive, 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 or I'm the recipient and I want to be able to give something. And um, it's not always as you know giant of an effort. Sometimes just letting somebody feel heard and acknowledging that 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 you're loved by them, that's a gift in itself, for sure.
I agree. And all of those people in the rings, they want to help. So when you can delegate something for them and they know that it's helping, that will make them feel better too.
Absolutely. All right, we'll go to the next slide. Um, this is also some questions I've learned um, over the years in my studies and my work, whether it's going into a family meeting at the hospital with somebody who's critically ill, or it's going into an exam room with a patient who is definitely not on the same page as their family, as far as goals are concerned. Um, these are things that I try to remind myself of. Um, Again, using that ring theory of, in my interaction with this person with ALS, am I keeping them in the center circle? You know, is what I'm about to offer to this conversation, does it have to do with me and how I'm feeling about things? Like that maybe isn't the right place to share that. And that's not the right person to share that with. Um, I think too, depending on the situation, depending on what's going on, I think there can be many, many people who are suffering, and we're suffering at different intensities and at different levels. But I think as far as having a difficult conversation, whether it's about a feeding tube decision, or if it's about um, mom won't accept more help and we're worried she's going to get hurt, just these common things that come up. I think it's good just to take a pause and just, evaluate, like, is mom really suffering? Is she really the one that's suffering? Or am I just in distress because I think she needs more help and I think she won't accept it? And again, there's not like, this isn't meant to like make you question yourself or uh, tamp down the love and care you have for the situation, but it's just a way to kind of pause and maybe think about it in a slightly different way. And you might come out of your thoughts a little differently, taking a different perspective. Um, when people say like, oh, we're going to have a difficult conversation, and it's not going to be comfortable. And I always, again, similar to the who is suffering, like who is uncomfortable? Why do we think that it's an uncomfortable topic? Is it something that's kind of we're not used to talking about, like dying or death or really hard things that historically in our culture we frankly don't do a great job of normalizing talking about those kinds of things, and reassuring our families and having a plan. And so it's just also, if you're feeling some stress or some anticipation about having to talk to a family member about something that's kind of got your tummy in a knot, just again thinking about, why do I feel so uncomfortable about this? And maybe even just like writing down a couple of words or phrases, and just trying to kind of get it out of your head and seeing it on paper can help. The other thing that is a good rule of thumb in any venue of life, I think, is, have I been specifically asked for my opinion? We all are so smart and we all know what is best. And we love to share that feedback with people. And it's not always welcome, right? It's not always warranted. And I don't know what it is about us humans that make us feel like we're just the experts on everybody. And if everybody would just listen to me, we'd all be happier. But that's a common phenomenon that we experience. So I guess, if you're talking with a family member, or there's a situation that you're trying to think through and you're about to offer up what you think is the perfect solution, maybe just pause and just ask yourself, like, has anyone really asked me for my opinion or my advice? Maybe not. That might not be the thing that's going to help this conversation.
Agreed.
I see. Yeah, Christy laughing because Christy's an expert on things too. So, and she doesn't hesitate to tell me when I need to straighten up and fly right.
Like, I wish I could give this slide to other people.
Yeah, well, that's right.
And-
That's the hard thing, is like, you can't expect other people to change necessarily. And it's so hard because that's what needs to happen. Yeah.
I love the weight though. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Linz,
Right.
how can Jennifer kind of relay this information to the other people in her life that probably need to hear this?
I mean, there's a couple different ways that come to mind. I think one could be, I mean, Jennifer, you said you love to go to these things because you love to learn. And I could feel that sort of contagious kind of energy coming through the screen when you said that. And I love that. You could always print this off and say, I attended this webinar and I thought it was really cool. I wanted to share this with you guys. And that you're not the one sort of directing this information to them, but you could say you're sort of the conduit, hey, she said this cool thing I thought about. Have you guys ever heard of weight? Like, I just thought that was kind of neat, So, kind of taking it from like not as much of a, I don't know, direct kind of confrontational or aggressive kind of approach, but just more of like a, hey, I did this webinar thing and there were some kind of neat things that we talked about. You guys should check this out.
I'm gonna totally try that.
You got to let me know how it goes.
Yeah, I tend to sometimes be a little passive aggressive and frustrated.
Yeah, like you just like have printouts of this sheet in every room of the house. You maybe get it framed right above the bathroom mirror,
Yeah, no, that's a great, I love that suggestion, Lindsay. Thank you.
Okay.
I think these questions are absolutely fantastic. And I think especially in the early stages when families are first dealing with the gripping reality of this disease and what it's going to mean to everyone. And initially we had, my son and I, he's the one with ALS, had a get together and a talk, but now we've been working on questions that we would like to bring to additional family members so that we could all share how we want to continue communicating as a family. But again, using, Lindsay, that circle was really great, because I think that visually gets the point across that the person with ALS is the center of this entire process. And that regardless of whether I, as a mother, would like to hear from my son every day and have him tell me how he's doing, that's not going to work for him. And he's the one that's making this thing, he's the one. So I think using these questions before you even sit down with your family or just the person who has ALS, and make sure that your questions don't, I mean, that you answer these questions before you create the questions that you want to ask the person with ALS, so that you word the questions in a way, exactly as the example you gave, said, oh my gosh, you have ALS, I feel so terrible. Well, it's not about I feel so terrible. They're the ones who have ALS. And, so the easier that we can pose questions to them and let them know that how they want to communicate with us is the way we promise to be, even though it might not be our way of communicating. And every family is different. I mean, when I talk about this kind of thing with other people, everyone has different relationships with family members. Some are using an email blast, which I think is weird, but it's working out great for their family. Others are doing a texting once a month or whatever. Or other people say, don't ask me, I'll tell you when I want to talk about it. And others say, I'll tell you every day. So it's a family. I think it's an opportunity for families to discuss how they feel they can work best to help the person with ALS and still feel like they're informed and knowledgeable about how they can help. Sorry for the long speech.
No,
This has
I
been
love
a really
that.
big thing for me, being the mother of a son with ALS. It just, and I, he's married, so I have a daughter-in-law to deal with. There's all kinds of relationship dynamics, and we just want to make this thing work. So these questions are just fabulous, because I can now use these questions to make sure my questions are better.
Yeah, Faith, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think that there's a vulnerability that you have to let yourself feel a little bit, that you're not in control. But that doesn't mean that you don't want to help and you don't love him and you want to, but I think it's just doing a little bit of sort of self-inventory, self-questioning and evaluation of like, okay, maybe she's not doing it the way I think she should, but maybe this is working for them, and it's so hard. And what you guys are all going through is so hard. And I hope you give yourselves a break, honestly, because there's no right way to do any of this. And I think how, well, we'll talk about it in a future slide. Maybe that's a good segue into the next slide of how I think about people who are involved in these types of situations. I don't know if we lost Christy.
I'm here.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
So, the old adage that there's, what assuming does. But I think in my mind, in my sort of worldview, these are some things that I try to really embrace, regardless of what situation. I think assuming best intent and, in the framework of ALS, certainly we are all feeling emotions and we're feeling them big. And sometimes they're hard. And things can get very out of hand. But I think centering yourself back to we're all just doing the best we can. And we all have something, right? We might not have a terminal disease. We might not have, something that's that defining, but we all have something. We all have lived a life where we've maybe experienced loss or sadness or grief. We're all carrying around something that's that at times can be very hard to carry around. And I think recognizing that none of us is immune to that and that we're all just doing our best and to just try to lead with assuming the best intention, even if it doesn't maybe look the way that you want it to look, even if it doesn't feel good, even if it's just keeping you up at night, that it's, just listen to me, I know what's best, but I think just trying to kind of just sort of set an intention for yourself that we're all doing the best we can, taking things kind of day by day, you know, putting things out on paper, maybe trying to have some of these planful conversations as a group when there isn't a decision to be made, when we're not feeling at our most emotionally charged, like using Faith's example of maybe we're going to sit down and kind of use this circle to kind of give our family a little bit of a guidance on how to go forward with this. There's no decisions to be made. Nothing's in crisis. There's no hair on fire anywhere, but this is a good point to kind of pause and maybe regroup ourselves. So these are some of my safe assumptions. And I don't know, maybe as you're thinking about this, maybe you have some additional ones. But I feel like when I approach difficult conversation or charged situations, these really ground me, and they kind of almost bring me a little bit of calm, like an inner calm, the recognition that everybody's feeling things really big and hard, and they just love and they're just doing the best they can, and this is probably bringing something else up that's hurt them in the past, and let's just try to have respect for everybody and do our best to move forward supporting the person in the center, right? So some of these helpful responses, for the comfort end, people sometimes say, like, I don't really know what to say. Some of these responses, I wish it wasn't like this. I wish you weren't hurting. I wish I could take this off of your, out of your heart and your spirits. I'm sorry. One thing that really stuck out to me when I was recently reading an article on palliative care communication in the ICU. Sorry, I'm getting like really into my palliative care head right now, but there's a physician who's just renowned in the world, Bob Arnold at University of Pittsburgh. But anyway, he just wrote an article kind of around the idea of hope. And when you're finding yourself in facing a terminal illness or facing an unbelievably hard situation, and how we as people on the outside who aren't living that experience think, well, if I ask them what are they hoping for, of course they're going to just say that they don't have ALS. Like, that's obvious, right? But people can have so many hopes. And so what else are you hoping for? It's the example he gave was to the terminally ill person with cancer. What are you hoping for? I'm hoping for a cure for my cancer. What else are you hoping for? I'm hoping I can go home and die with hospice with my family surrounding me, which just, if you just stopped at that first, what are you hoping for? Well, I hope I hope I don't have this disease. Well, they don't really understand what's going on, or they're not getting it, or, well, that's something silly. That's not possible. But I think that people can have many hopes held in their minds and in their hearts at the same time. And I think that asking those questions can bring about really rich conversation. And it can be small things or seemingly small things. I hope to watch my kid hit a home run. It's just, I love the idea of challenging the idea that people just have one thing that they're hopeful for. And I also like the idea that hope is different from want. Want is more tangible. It's more, it's more black and white, I think, and it's not always set in reality, right? But hope, the sky's the limit. We can hope for anything and it can evolve. And you can hope for two things that are seemingly, contradictive. I ask this question a lot, not just to my patients, but to their family members. It gives me a better insight into where they are and how they're thinking about things. I like this visual of the listen. And if you rearrange the letters, it spells out silent. Because I think we can't really sit and listen if we're talking. And I put this little visual in many different talks that I do because for myself, it's a good reminder to sometimes just shut my trap and listen.
For us all, good reminder.
Yeah. So these were some of the situations that they had forwarded to me as examples of some of the difficult conversations that people are wrestling with. And I'm hopeful that in sort of what we've talked about today and how we maybe think about the bigger situation, how the person in the center is maybe responding to the situation, how the people around them are responding. Maybe we're thinking about our own responses to some of these situations a little differently. Maybe being willing to consider thinking about our own role a little differently. And it's hard, but I think by keeping that person in the center, hopefully that sort of is kind of your North Star, that's what we're all here for. And it's not at all to minimize the suffering that the people around that center circle are experiencing, because that suffering is very real. But there are people in those outer rings that can help you explore that and process that and try to figure out a way to continue on in that suffering, right? I'm keeping an eye on the time. I know the last, there was a question about how do I ask if there's a power of attorney. I can really speak to Wisconsin, which is where I practice. Wisconsin is one of the only states in the country where we are not a next of kin legal authority. So that means if a husband and wife are brought into the emergency room and one is maybe, unconscious, they were in a car accident or something, we in our state do not automatically recognize the married spouse to be the decision maker. And I think really during COVID, when we were just getting really critically ill people coming in to the hospitals and having to be, intubated, thus, we're essentially putting them in a medicalized coma, rendering them unable to communicate their wishes. It really revealed to us, wow, we really need to do a better job of educating people on having a plan if they are rendered unable to communicate their wishes and direct their care because of a medical crisis. Who do they trust to do that? And so our health system has really taken efforts and steps to normalize the discussion. Anyone 18 and over, we are having these discussions with. If you were in a car accident and you were brought in unconscious, who do you trust to make decisions for your care? And that's kind of the base question, right? We want to be proactive. We want to be talking about it before there's a crisis. We know that people who have a plan, like a document that names legal decision makers, it can help avoid unwanted treatment. It crystallizes who's the right person to talk to, what are the goals of care. You know, in Wisconsin, you can nominate up to 2 people using the state form. We encourage people to be very, very open and honest with the people that they're nominating, and having those conversations, exploring those conversations periodically. You know, you might want to have that conversation when you get a diagnosis. You might want to have that conversation, you know, if a family member has passed away, you might go, oh my gosh, I don't know if I have a person that would speak for me. You know, I could do a whole hour on just power of attorney. And then Jennifer, your question of what's the difference. So I think of advanced directives as sort of the umbrella term, and a power of attorney for healthcare is one form under that umbrella. There's also like the living will, called a declaration of physicians in some states. A do not resuscitate order is under that advanced directive umbrella. I think the biggest takeaway for me, and when I talk about power of attorney for healthcare, is I think it can be a really empowering experience for the person who's creating their document, to know that they have nominated 2 people that they trust literally with their life to direct their healthcare if they are essentially, you know, unable to. What does that look like? I usually just say to people, imagine the person's in a coma. Who's going to make decisions about a feeding tube? Who's going to make decisions about if they need to go to a nursing home? You know, you're thinking about these people that would make these decisions. You're trusting them, but you've had those conversations with these people, right? And you're exploring your values and your goals, and you're saying, hey, if I'm in a vegetative state, like I don't want my life prolonged. That's not a quality of life that's acceptable for me or my family. So I trust you. Do you feel comfortable making those decisions? If I couldn't, if yes, then you're my person. We do have some people whose spouses do the brave thing and say, I don't know that I could make the same decisions that my husband would want, and I don't know if I could serve in this role. And I'm grateful that they admit that, and that opens up a conversation for us to say, great, then that allows you to be the spouse in that situation, and you don't have the weight of making those decisions on behalf of your spouse. Well, some people approach that scenario as it's too big of a responsibility, and I just don't know that I could do that. So it allows for more conversation and exploration of who does it make sense, who do you trust. Some people might even say, I wouldn't choose this for myself, but I know that this is what, you know, Mary wants, so I'm going to follow Mary's wishes. So the big takeaway, normalize it to everybody, you know, regardless of what your state laws are. I think everybody should have something on file. Most states have forms. They don't require a notary. They don't require an attorney. Do a little bit of research, talk to your social worker at your health system, get a little bit more information on how can we do this. You don't need to pay an attorney $400 an hour to do this. You can change it at any time. It's not set in stone. You know, it's something that should be normalized. It's something I firmly believe everybody 18 and over, regardless of health, should have. Sorry we had to kind of blow through that, you guys. I just am realizing we're really getting down to it. This is my last slide, and this is written by a woman named Kate Bowler. She is a chaplain at Duke University in palliative care, and for many years was living with stage 4 cancer, and has done it's defined her life's work in living with the uncertain and the unknown. And when life gives you things that you weren't ready for or you didn't want, she does a lot of work around, but I was a good person. Why is this happening to me? But this is a blessing that she's written and that I share with so many of my patients that get this diagnosis and their families. It just talks a little bit about the before and the after, and I hope it gives you a sense of what her message is that you're not alone in this. And please, you know, feel free to look her up. She's got written a couple books. She sends out weekly kind of messages of some are funny, some are like, you know, the blessing for the parent to teenagers, but primarily non-religious, although it does say the word blessing. It's not rooted in any type of faith, but it's more maybe just a prayer for your peace, a prayer for your well-being and support. And she did write a book that was pretty famous. It was as soon as I started to say it out loud, it like left my brain. But it was basically like everything happens for a reason, and all the other lies I've loved, and just challenging that idea of when people say, well, you know, everything happens for a reason. And it's like, okay, I was just given the diagnosis of ALS. What's my reason? You know, that's not fair. And so I just really love her, and I find her to be just really inspiring. And I love opportunities to share her with other people because I find her just fantastic.